Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive into the Archive, where today we're diving into... I forgot the name of the album.
Sunbather?
Yeah, we're diving into Sunbather by Deafheaven. Deafheaven are a California black metal band who are best known for popularizing the Blackgaze style of the genre, which essentially is a mix of black metal, specifically the more like atmospheric tinged black metal, and shoegaze. Although this record also has, I'd say, some influence from screamo, specifically in the vocals, and also maybe like a tinge of post-rock in there.
I would definitely say post-rock and post-metal.
The result of these influences, to me, makes just such a dreamy, gorgeous, blissful feeling record. It very much has like a melancholic feel to everything throughout this album. For me, that feeling of melancholy is stronger on this record than it is on like any other album I've listened to. It's incredibly potent, and I think that comes out very clearly through vocals, which I guess largely talk about or center on George Clark, the lead vocalist for the band. They center on his alienation and isolation.
This album is like, it's all about the like atmospheres, the composition that it creates. I mean, they're using black metal in such a way that it somehow creates this like very pillowy production, and it's combined with these harsh vocals from George Clark. Very interesting feel to it, and it definitely has this just pervading sense of longing and melancholy to it.
I have to say, I especially love on this record in particular, the vocal style that George Clark uses, as I said, it's very screamo influenced. And as a result, there's so much more like emotional impact to this record that I think isn't quite as present on some of their other records. Just like the passion with which he delivers the vocals, it really kind of carries a lot of the record. Or at least the emotional aspect of the record, I'd say. You know, these songs would still be emotional and very beautiful without his vocals, but they're really elevated by them, I find.
I would definitely have to agree. This album would not be the same without the vocal delivery present on this album. It very much contrasts with the production, but complements it as well. All around, it fits in very well into the compositions. It makes it very beautiful and also sad.
This album lyrically is also very interesting. There's kind of this consistent, I guess, juxtaposition between, I guess, the like outward beauty that George perceives in the world and his own, I guess, internalized ugliness. It comes up quite a bit, specifically on Sunbather, but it's also on Dreamhouse, and I think also definitely on tracks like Vertigo that it comes out in, I guess, a bit of a different way. Different tracks kind of prioritize, I guess, different parts of it. So like the Pecan Tree is a track that's focused more so on George's own problems, whereas other tracks are very much more focused on the other side of that, where his perception of the world around him, which is really interesting.
Also, a lot of like how he kind of fits into the world, or doesn't fit at some points.
I guess with that, we'll get into the first track, which is Dreamhouse.
Yeah, this track, it's a pretty short intro, coming in at 9 minutes. Yeah. I don't know. I think this track is like a great start to the album, personally.
Yes, I also agree. I think this track in particular, I think, kind of sets up a lot of the themes that are explored throughout the record. So you have, like, he mentions his struggle with alcoholism, which comes back very heavily on Vertigo and the Pecan Tree, where he says, hindered by sober restlessness, submitting to the amber crutch. There's also this allusion to George's desire for, I guess, wealth and status, with the line fantasizing the sight of Manhattan, which comes up very heavily on Sunbather, but also a bit on Vertigo. There's also another line where he talks about his problems with relationships, or more so, I guess, intimacy, where he says, the slipping on gloves to lay tenderly. basically implying that he has just this barrier between him and those around him that he can't seem to get past. And this mostly comes up on the Pecan Tree at the end.
Yeah, you just hit all the points I was gonna make. I just like the ending of this track, the I Want to Dream in reference to death.
I guess for context, the end is a conversation that George had with, I think, a friend of his, or I think someone he was interested in. Basically, it's a conversation he had over text while he was very drunk. It starts out with the other person saying, "I'm dying," and then he asks, "Is it blissful?" And they respond, "It's like a dream," and then he says, "I want to dream." And to me, that's kind of where this contrast between like beauty and I guess I phrased it in my notes as like beauty and tragedy almost. And that's kind of what I perceive in this like conversation, is that like it's like phrased so beautifully with such a dark and depressing meaning behind it.
I think the vocals at that point just kind of like hit hard. They definitely feel different from the rest of the track, and also just the instrumentation. It comes in with like cleaner guitars at that point. I think that really helps accentuate the ending of the song. It's very...
I especially love the drums at that section. They're like, in combination with the guitars, they just feel like they're crashing down over you. And it's almost like everything is like kind of like collapsing around you as you listen, which I think complements the lyrics quite well. After that, we have a little interlude.
A little short interlude.
A little short.
3 minutes. Shortest track on this album, by far.
Yeah. We have Irresistible. It's just a very nice, like, little come down, I guess, from the climax of Dreamhouse. There's very much intensity at the end of Dreamhouse that I think Irresistible kind of like, it calms you down afterwards. I still feel like the piano and everything on Irresistible is it still feels like depressing, but it's like lighter than I think some of the later tracks on the record.
It still fits that melancholic feel.
There's still like a gloominess to it. Then we get to move on to Sunbather, the title track off the album. This track is maybe my favorite song of all time. I love how this track is introduced. It's like this just intense like crashing of guitars and drums. There's like a section of silence between the end of Irresistible and the beginning of Sunbather that lasts for like 20 seconds. And just like these guitars and drums come in and just like instantly like jolts you out of this slumber, I guess, that you're kind of put into with Irresistible. I think that this track, more so than any on the record, really emphasizes the feelings of melancholy and loneliness and alienation that are present throughout. Lyrically, this track is essentially about a time when George was driving through a wealthy neighborhood in San Francisco, and essentially it's him coming to the sudden realization he doesn't belong there and he never will. He is focused so much on how beautiful this neighborhood is and how he sees himself as ugly and unworthy, or not unworthy, but being unable to obtain or grasp what the people in this neighborhood have. That kind of like, I guess, theme of not being able to obtain this status that he desires is also present very heavily on Vertigo. This track like introduces that idea very well. And as I said, this kind of continues the line from Dreamhouse, or I guess it expands on the line from Dreamhouse where he says, fantasizing the sight of Manhattan. There's a quote of George that I don't know if it's true, because I think the link to the quote is gone. The quote that I remember him saying is, he's always had a fascination with wealth, a longing for it, yet anger for it, essentially. And that kind of dichotomy comes up very heavily on this track. The beauty of the neighborhood is very heavily emphasized throughout it. Very early on, there's a line where he says,
I watched how green the trees were, and I watched the steep walkways and the white fences.
Within those lines, there's very much an idealization of the neighborhood and George's image for it. Like, there is there's this perfection to it, basically, that George can't have, as he expresses later on in the track. He talks about specifically his own ugliness. He has the line, "Dishonest and ugly through the space in my teeth." Despite essentially his appearance of being, white and like generally, I'd say, conventionally attractive, there's something about him that I guess the neighborhood or the wealth within it like would reject. He feels that sense of rejection is very much emphasized by the lyrics. "The hardest part for the weak was stroking your fingers with rings full of teeth," and that's referring to the sunbather that he sees as he's driving through the neighborhood. It's essentially him saying that the girl that he sees has never had to like go through the same hardships that he had to as a child, which is why he refers to her as being weak, or he emphasizes stroking your fingers with rings full of teeth, which refers to how, or this comfort that she enjoys from this neighborhood is built off the backs of people like him, or the problems and suffering that he has to go through. I'm going to call out the Genius annotations for a second, because some people think there's like a relationship that's part of this song, or like...
So I think you can interpret a song in a couple different ways. You can interpret that he's like talking directly to the sunbather, or that he's personifying the neighborhood as a woman.
I think the sunbather is representative of the neighborhood, but he's not talking to her. There's nothing that implies he's talking to her or that a relationship is involved. The only relationship that I perceive here is being between him and the neighborhood and his feelings towards the neighborhood. Some of the Genius annotations are saying that there's like a relationship or like a past lover is involved in this, and there's like literally nothing in the lyrics to allude to that. The main focus is George perceiving the neighborhood as like rejecting him, as him never being able to obtain the status and comfort that the people in the neighborhood are able to enjoy. And that's why there is the final lines of the song at the climax, which I think is absolutely beautiful. He says, "It's 5 a.m. and my heart flourishes at each passing moment, always and forever." To me, this is speaking on how George is never able to have like the safety that those in the neighborhood enjoy, and he's essentially saying that he will always be anxious, or he'll always worry about all sorts of things that the people in the neighborhood never have to think about. Do you want to say anything about this track?
I think you covered lyrically a lot about it. I really just love the sonic intensity to this track. I think the composition is probably the best on the album of any song. Like, Sunbather is easily my favorite song off the album. I wouldn't call it my favorite song of all time. It's certainly incredible, though. But just the instrumentation, composition, progression, all of the sound of this track is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I like just made this connection, but I think also like the end racing, my heart flourishes at each passing moment. I think you can also kind of connect to the previous part in the song where he says, "I sweated against the leather," and also "I grip the wheel." I perceive it as being him becoming anxious or worrying about his status, like in life in general. But yeah, the climax to the song I think is easily like, it's probably my favorite climax to any song. Just how intense and depressing and melancholic it feels. I don't know. I haven't found any album that really replicates the feeling that Sunbather gives me. After that, we have the interlude, Please Remember, which is also probably my favorite interlude of all time. The warped and like distorted soundscape that this interlude has is just like the perfect follow-up to Sunbather. There's this uneasiness to it that I think plays really well into George's own uneasiness with his, sense of wealth inequality and worry about things that he only worries about because of his, status in life. There's background vocals on this track, which are recited by the lead singer or vocalist of Alcest, who are, considered like the originators of like the Blackgaze genre. Passage from the story is about the main character coming to this realization that the only reason why he is in the relationship he's in is because of chance. Like, and if something else happened, if like events played out slightly differently, he would not be in that relationship. And it's like this realization that it isn't like meant to be or anything. And I think it plays really heavily into, again, the uneasiness of this track, but also the feeling of like insecurity, I guess, like kind of comes up on Sunbather, but I think it's more present here.
It's like about being secure about love and about how love is kind of taken for granted.
I think more generally, it just communicates that feeling of like insecurity about one's current life position. The only reason why George is in the place he is now is not because he's like supposed to be there, or there's not some reason behind it. He's just there because whatever, basically. And I absolutely love how like this track like slowly builds into this just cacophony of noise and distortion, and then clears away like halfway through into this really beautiful, mainly like solo guitar piece, or not solo guitar, there's more instruments to it, but very like reverby guitar piece that's very melancholic and depressing.
I don't extrapolate this track to being about how his entire life is kind of chance. It's mostly the love thing, because I feel like the next track, Vertigo, is essentially like where I am at this point in my life. That's my fault, essentially. And it's about regretting pasts.
That's interesting, because I don't take it to be that. To me, Vertigo is like an extension of Sunbather, whereas Sunbather is a realization. It's like a realization of like not belonging. Vertigo is like disillusionment with that, essentially, with that realization. These feelings of alienation and like entrapment in his situation lead him to engaging in behavior that is self-destructive and detrimental to him. It's mainly drinking is the one that comes up most notably. From these alienated feelings he has, he goes back to habits that he knows aren't good for him, but are ones that he just falls back onto routinely. There's some really like beautiful lines in this part. There's one where he says focusing on light through the blinds, as well as there's also a line where he says slave to reality under a monarch sky, which to me again allude to like his status in life, his inability to move upwards in life, essentially. Specifically the second one, a slave to reality under a monarch sky, is like he is trapped on the ground and he's never able to obtain the wealth and status that he wants. And that's also mirrored in the album's cover, which is like a very pretty gradient pink color, and it's supposed to mimic essentially what you see when you look at the sun with your eyes closed. You're never really able to like look directly into the sun, just look at it through clouded vision almost. I also love the progression on this track. It starts really slow and I guess calm, and slowly just builds into this like much more intense, warped sounding like soundscape, essentially.
This track is like a slower intro than other track. Works really well. Very, very, very cool song.
The climax of this track I also think is amazing. George's vocals especially. They sound so, I guess, desperate almost. They sound like desperate and like miserable. After that we have Windows, which is an incredibly interesting interlude. You have this really off-putting, kind of distorted soundscape that's present. Two samples are overlaid on the track. There's one that starts off the track and then it kind of goes away and then it comes back at the end of the track. And that sample is of the band's guitarist buying drugs. The other sample, which is in the middle of the track, is of a preacher essentially warning about the dangers of going to hell and of sin in general, I guess, which definitely I think plays really well into like the like theme or feeling at this point of the record that these self-destructive behaviors are leading George further down a hole that he's unable to get out of.
I don't necessarily find that this track fits in with the themes of the album that well. I think it plays into the theme of like that of looking outward versus looking inward. The preacher is like, yes, you all go to hell. He's looking at hell in like an outward direction, whereas like buying drugs is more of a personal hell. It's a personal struggle.
Because I think this plays perfectly into the album's themes. At this point in the record especially, there's like this feeling that George is unable to escape his current position in life, and he feels as though like his reliance on these behaviors that he has, whether it be like alcohol as expressed in the interlude, drugs, really to me feels like he's just like spiraling downwards, that his inability to escape leads him to become, I guess, disillusioned with that feeling and dig further down. After that, we get the Pecan Tree.
We do indeed get the Pecan Tree. This is the closer to the album. It's one of the more aggressive tracks on the album, I'd say.
This track is very bitter.
It's Clark lashing back at mostly his father for a lot of things.
Or he expresses these feelings of his inability to, like, I guess, healthily interact with other people. You have the climax of the track, which is fantastic, where he repeats the phrase, "I am my father's son, I am no one, I cannot love, it's in my blood," over again. And there's also earlier in the track where he says, "In the room full of family, but couldn't find one." This theme of being unable to relate or love other people ties into his father's alcoholism. This is demonstrated throughout the track with his lines, "drooling red from my eyes to meet the bitter sun." This refers more to like Clark's own alcoholism. So Clark demonstrates that he has an ability to like relate to other people through these lines, but then he feels very heavily. The reason why he is this way is because of his father, who was a pretty heavy drinker, I guess. There is the line just before the climax, I guess, where he says, "I lay drunk on the concrete on the day of your birth, in celebration of all you were worth," which is really very bitter, very angry. A lot of this track is like how he feels his father's actions leads to him repeating those same actions, essentially. His father being a shitty father and being an alcoholic led to him becoming an alcoholic later in life. He kind of like blames him for, honestly, most of his problems. The climax is incredible on this track. So angry, but horribly depressing.
Great kind of like explosion at the end of the album. It hammers home a lot of points. How life kind of sucks because of your situation. It does end on a fade out though, and I kind of hate fade outs. So
I don't know. The fade out works for this.
I feel like there's a stronger way to end this album than a fade out.
I think the fade out works well. To me, it implies that this is. It's not over, if that makes sense. Like, he is still struggling with this. There's not like, it's not like there's a conclusive end to these problems for him. He's just left to always deal with these issues. It's also clear on this track that he really wishes he could just like forget all of these things. It seems like he feels that it would like allow him to escape his behavior. He has the line, "destroying the tomb of memories from your life." He definitely wishes he could just like get rid of everything. Anyway, that's Sunbather. It's about alienation, wealth inequality, and is it like generational alcoholism, I guess? Generational problems and self-hate and desire for wealth and inability to obtain wealth and depression, economic anxiety, and all sorts of stuff, and I love it. This album means a lot to me. It's mostly been me talking, so you could probably tell. Yeah, this album's a 10 for me.
So, for me, hi. I also really like this album. I know I haven't been talking about it that much, but mostly because Joe has been saying all the things that I would want to say. He's a great talker, that man.
Yes, talking, my favorite activity.
But this is an absolutely incredible album. Like I said earlier, for me, I know we've been talking a lot lyrically and thematically about this album, but it's, at the end of the day, this album is all about the the soundscape on it. The instrumentation throughout the album is absolutely incredible. All the compositions of like all the longer tracks I think are just really, really great, and I've been in love with them since I first heard this record. I just love the way that the forlorn lyrics combine with these very like atmospheric instrumentals, and also the noise. It all comes together incredibly well. Makes really for one whole complete package. Yeah, it's real good. There's like, I have like a few small problems with things here and there, but overall still an incredible record. I'm at like a 9 out of 10.
Damn, only a 9?
Only a 9.
How could you? If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and comment what your favorite Sunbather is.
Yes.
Who's your favorite? Brendan's mine.
Ooh. I don't think I've ever gone sunbathing.
Damn.
Have you?
No.
I've never like particularly tried to get like a tan or anything, so.
Yeah. Well, anyway. But yeah, if you enjoyed that video, please hit like, consider subscribing to our channel. We got a lot more content just like it. Check out our other deep dives if you want in-depth discussion of some other albums we've taken a look at before. Check out our other reviews. Watch any content that we've put out. Do anything. Yeah.
You're making us sound desperate.
Are we not?
Well, yeah, but like we're not supposed to sound desperate.
But yeah. Anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day.